I will call this meeting to order, 7:06 p.m. And we'll move right to item 2, which is opening statements. First by me, Town Council Chair, and then by Chairman Tony Holt of the Board of Education. So I'll keep my remarks brief. I know we got a decent amount up on this agenda. I'll just note that, as we all know, this is a very difficult budget year. We've got a lot of pressures that we've got to work through, and I hope that tonight's conversation is one where both elected bodies can see the difficult dilemmas each one faces, so we can have a comprehensive picture of the current scenario that we're in. And I just ask that the conversation is courteous and respectful. We know that we see things differently, some of us, and that's part of our democratic process. And I just hope that we can listen and have a good conversation. So that I'll turn over to you, Chairman Holt.
All right, thank you, Chairman Murray. Thank you. First, I would like to voice my appreciation to all the councilors that joined us in requesting this joint meeting. As Chairman Murray mentioned, there's far more information available than can simply be conveyed in the budget requests or in the meetings that we've had so far. It is my hope that through events like tonight, we can ensure that you all have the necessary information to make the difficult decisions that have been entrusted to you. For this to work, we must believe that everyone involved in this process is doing so because they genuinely care for our children, our neighbors, and our community. We must take it on faith that no one has ulterior motives and that the information presented is done so with honest conviction. We are all here to help. The Board of Education proposed budget took a slightly different path than in previous years. Beginning last June, we began having conversations on critical budget topics, such as USIF, transportation, and overall spending. In August, we worked through the recent NEASC audit report. We made sure to digest where the district was strong and where we had room to grow. November brought a focus on enrollment. What was the trend? Where did the predictions have us going? What would that do to existing class sizes on the various educational levels? We then sat down with the superintendent to understand what initiatives he and his staff were already working. From all that, the team identified 4 priorities for Dr. Willett to focus his energies on. Develop and begin implementation of a full-day pre-K 4-year-old program. Expand the Pathways program to include additional pathways and expand student pathway-oriented engagement activities and internships. Continue to develop district and school safety and security measures and resources, including school resource officers, reunification plans, a district comprehensive threat assessment process, and additional staff training. And fourth, to increase multi-tiered systems of support for all students through organizational and programmatic improvements, increasing supportive environments, student engagement, differentiation, and timely and effective feedback. The intent was to plan the path forward to ensure the appropriate educational opportunities that will continue to make our children competitive in a rapidly advancing world. When the time came for Dr. Willett to create his proposed budget, he was asked to produce a budget proposal that included everything necessary to achieve the goals as identified by the state, by the board, and by his staff. He was asked not to make any reductions at that point. You see, we recognize that budgets are about priorities. For the board to assess its priorities, it needs all the cards on the table. We had many conversations about this. Multiple perspectives were discussed and significant compromises were reached. School safety remained a priority. To that end, 2 SRO and a social worker were included in the proposal. Other things were not. Despite data showing over 28,000 visits to the nurse's office, the medical staff was not bolstered. One thing to remember when thinking about the request, the resulting request for an increase of about $3.2 million included $2.5 million in must pays like contractual obligations, insurance, transportation, and energy. Put simply, if the budget allocation is less than requested, must pays have to be funded. Something else has to go. Tonight, you are going to hear about what those reductions could be. Let's be clear. The board has not met to finalize these decisions. That will wait until after the council has set its final numbers. The board met to discuss the possible areas, for understanding. They met to identify opportunities to save. It broke my heart to hear the passionate pleas of our neighbors and children last night. No one on the board wants to reduce anything. Years of limited budgets have eliminated the low-hanging fruit. There's just nothing left to reduce that won't have a tangible impact. Dr. Willett and his staff are left to ask themselves not what will have an effect on student experience, but instead what will have the smallest effect on learning for the core subjects. My hope for tonight is that the council members leave with an appreciation of the weight of your decisions. Please don't dismiss the conversation as doom and gloom. It is information meant to empower you to consider what your experts are advising you of. We recognize that it is a difficult budget year and that increased taxes are not desirable. I am asking that your proposed budget better represent Tolland's overall priorities. The Board of Education is tasked by the state to maintain good public elementary and secondary schools, implement the educational interests of the state, and provide such other educational activities as is, in its judgment, will best serve the interests of our school district. The Tolland Board of Education's budget request is our sincere effort to do just that. Thank you, Chairman Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. All right, I believe that brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which is presentation on impact of the tax revaluation, estimated property tax increases for homeowners at the town manager's current budget proposal of 3.03%. I had some slides that I think are part of the larger deck. Please let me know when we're ready with those. You ready?
Go ahead. Yes, I did.
Is this what he's?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we can flip to the first content slide, please. All right. So first, the intent of these two items is to give everyone here an understanding of the current predicament that the council faces. In other words, I want to provide a bit more context for the reason why our town manager provided us with a 2.99% proposed increase rather than the full requested budget. Now, again, this is for context only. I think we can have a good conversation afterwards, but I do think it's important to discuss this. So, per state statute, the town is required to do a reassessment of property values and recalculate its mill rate. This has to be done every 5 years. It cannot be deferred or ignored. And unfortunately, the changes in the past for valuation were quite drastic. Not only did some homes skyrocket in their value, sometimes by upwards of 50%, but our commercial property as a share of the grand list actually shrunk as a proportion. It did not increase in value as much. And the result was a shift in the tax burden from businesses to homeowners. And we're seeing the effect of this even at the 3.03% spending increase, which is in the town manager's proposed budget. Even at that level, taxes for homeowners are expected to increase an average of 8 to 9%. This is an unprecedented situation. It's important that we consider this impact when it comes to passing a budget up on referendum. And I'll also just add, it's important that we get a budget to pass relatively soon in 1 or 2 tries. We have staff that need to plan around their budget for the next fiscal year. It's also just important to show the town as being able to pass a budget for purposes of staff retention and recruitment and getting good talent that wants to come here. And of course, too many failed referendums can also impact our credit rating, especially if they happen repetitively. So can we go to the next slide? Right. It's a little hard to see, but I'm going to assume that you flipped to it. So lastly, I do want to just touch, because I know we've touched on some things, because I know that this has been brought up in the past with some emails and public participation at our public hearing last night. So I do want to just understand where we are today in the proposed budget with funds, whether it's unassigned fund balance or other funds, and how they're playing up into this budget. So we're already looking at taking $300,000 in the proposed budget out of the tax stabilization fund. Please note this is the maximum amount allowed by our ordinance. So not the current proposal put forward by our town manager, Brian Foley, is not shy about using that fund. Additionally, we're looking to take another $300,000 from the unassigned fund balance to cover operating expenditures. And another $226,000 from that fund is proposed to be taken out to cover one-time capital expenditures that would otherwise be covered by debt or operating funds. So in total, we're looking to spend $826,000 from tax stabilization and unassigned before we even talk about additional ideas which the council is exploring. Now, I'll say I'm certainly willing to have a discussion with our finance department if there's more that we can do in a particularly tough year, but I think it's critical we kind of understand where the proposal currently sits. Additionally, I'll just note that the council has been presented with a couple of other ideas, which I certainly, speaking from my own personal opinion, I'm definitely interested in pursuing. We are considering assuming that we do not get or that we do get the same ECS amount as last year and backstop that with unassigned if it doesn't come through. So in other words, that would be a $300,000 benefit from the revenue side. That is not in town manager Foley's budget. That's something that the council will deliberate on tomorrow night. Another idea that I floated and I want to continue to pursue would be a higher tax collection rate of 99.1% based on actual collection rates from years past. I think if actual show that we're bringing in a little bit more than what we're predicting, we should definitely put that up in the calculations. And then also the town council at its meeting last week voted to revise how motor vehicle taxes are calculated, which added another 15 million roughly to the grand list and should help offset homeowners' tax bills because it'll decrease that as a percentage of the budget. It's not a huge impact. It's relatively modest, but it is something that the council did vote up on doing and will be part of the proposal. So that I think that covers it. Or I guess I could just mention one other thing that's not on the slides, but just something that was brought up a lot at the public hearing last night is with capital. Again, an area certainly me personally I'd be willing to explore. However, it's important to note that as far as a lot of capital expenditures that town manager Foley ran through last night, most capital expenditures are either funded through debt, special funds that have very specific purposes like an ambulance fund or the dog pound fund, or from the unassigned fund balance, like I just mentioned. So again, something we can look into, but there's limited opportunities there to use that as an ability to really offset operating expenditures and make a major dent. But again, I'm open to ideas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chairman Holt and Dr. Willett for their presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Lyon. Dr. Will.
Okay, excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little bit, so sorry for the raspiness of it. So everybody's aware that we have a particularly difficult budget season. I know that there are many, let me try to get this so it's better. There, we'll just go with the slideshow. All right, so, and it's been well articulated by the town council what the challenges are. I think the board has also articulated things that it has struggled with to try to provide the best options for the schools. The budget season has presented some significant challenges. Obviously, there's a tough tax reevaluation year for Tolland that can't be ignored and provides a lot of concerns and pressure. There's concerns over utilization of the fund balance for reoccurring costs that are completely understandable. On the board side, over $1 million this year. There's been an over $1 million increase for insurance. That represents a 2.2%. And in years like this, it's tragic if sometimes these fluctuations in insurance, if there aren't any other places to go, they can cost staff and they can cost impacts in a district that maybe in a different year, those impacts would be less or they would be able to be mitigated in other ways. So it's a kind of tragic situation that insurance is as high as it is. We've had some good years. This one is not so good year. So the Board of Ed faces an over $1 million increase in insurance that has about a 2.2% composition of the budget. It's very difficult. The Tolland Public Schools also have a 10-year average increase of 1.67% with a 5-year average of 1.88%. The Tolland per pupil expenditure is and has continued to be in the lowest quartile in Connecticut. Right now, it's about 129 out of 165. And while special education and para support staff slightly increased due to IEP needs and state mandates, the TPS have reduced 47 teaching positions since fiscal year 2006. So any adjustment for enrollment has been made already. The TPS enrollment evens out in 27-28 and is projected to increase from that year at least through 2035 by 8.2%. TPS negotiated contracts with bargaining units are at or below the average settlements in the state. So they were well done and there's no abuse there. And the average percentage of budget remaining at the end of the year from fiscal year 2014 to 2024 was approximately 0.89% with a median of 0.31%. So there haven't been a tremendous amount left over either. There were some crazy years with a state budget crisis and COVID, but mostly you can see that there hasn't been a ton left over. So despite years of district efforts to create cost avoidance and revenue programs, the low average budget increase has had a significant cumulative effect. If one considers that the typical budget average increase to maintain services over, say, a 10-year period is about 3%, the Tolland Public Schools have over 10 years been allocated about $5.2 million less than what a 3% would have provided, which has, again, had a cumulative impact. So both the town and the board are in a tough place because that kind of budget over a span of years doesn't leave a budget with a lot of options. When you have a tough year with insurance under these circumstances, it's a very hard thing to mitigate without the loss of staff or significant loss of programs. And that's something we're trying to find a way through. So we're not coming tonight with simply a statement of the challenge because we all pretty much have a good idea of what the challenge is. We're going to talk a little bit about, how that might impact the school district this year. And then we'll talk a little bit about offering a potential solution. So for possible reductions or things that could be reduced this year to try to get to that point, you have about 5 teachers from schools across the district, secretaries, nurses, custodians, probably about 1 secretary, a couple of nurses, maybe a custodian, the middle school athletics program, all board funding for clubs and activities in the school district. And that would include things like a Washington trip, because what people have to remember about that is what that is the stipends. I saw something out there that it's 10,000. It's not 10,000. It's 130,000. And so these are stipends that are paid to the people to run the clubs, and eliminating those stipends would eliminate the funding for the clubs. Reductions in buses and routes are being considered again, including an additional reduction of 2 more routes. Significant reductions in multiple programs, ELA, math, science, art, music, and things like pep band. Academic supports for struggling learners, which we call MTSS. It's multi-tiered systems of support. It's a state terminology. That could be impacted or reduced from the high school, taken out of the budget that we were trying to create with it in it. These reductions are on top of prior reductions made in the superintendent's proposed budget and the BOE and the BOE adopted budget. And if you look at those documents, you can see more information about some of the additional ones. They included 4.0 or 4 paraeducator positions and a nurse as well. Parent guardians could also be subject to increased pay to participation fees of possibly $300 per student. So these are some of the impacts, and the board had reviewed and thought about and mulled over some that are not on this list as well. There's quite a few in order to get there. And what people have to keep in mind is that if you're going to go from where the Board of Ed adopted budget was to where understandably the town had set that, that is a $1.9 million reduction. So a $1.9 million reduction does not come easily, as we know. And so there are many things that would have to be reduced to get there. Possible solutions that we could think about. Instead of using capital funds for the TMS auditorium seating replacement, there's about $188,000 that are allocated for the seating and TMS. The educational reserve fund at the end of every year there's a possibility of transferring end of year funds. But that might be left over from one year to the next, but those funds are not available until the third quarter of the next fiscal year. But if the town were willing to reconsider the TMS seating replacement and instead put the $188,000 towards the capital technology investment of the Ed Tech initiative, then at the third quarter of the next fiscal year, if there were ERF funds available at the end of this year, that could be used to pay for the TMS auditorium replacement. So the 188 could be used up front for that technology, which would offset this budget and help save positions and other things. And those could still be done at the end of the third quarter of next fiscal year or that summer through any ERF funds that we may have available at that time. This is not that different than stuff that we've had on the capital request for years as tech up or lab upgrades. It qualifies as the same type of thing, and we've had those in capital for years. So it should qualify as a capital expense. And it's a way to do it that would not make any change in what was requested by the town manager. And understandably, it's 3%. If we had 3% all the years in the past, we probably wouldn't be in the same spot we're in now. The next thing that we could do is utilization of the UISF fund. It's the Utility Internal Service Fund to offset the excessive shift in the cost of electrical power. The UISF fund was set up partially to handle things exactly like this. So we have had an excessive shift in electrical power, and all of you know that electrical costs have gone up. This fund exists partially to handle things like this. The Board of Education ended the 2024 year with a UISF reserve balance of $614,015 in reserve. That increased by $87,000 in that fiscal year. I'm suggesting we use $380,000 of these funds to offset the $777,879 projected electricity cost. This would leave about $234,000 in this fund. Typically, a KERMA deductible, if a boiler or something blows up, is $25,000. So it still would allow us roughly 9 events. We could handle 9 events if we were submitting these to KERMA. It's still a reasonable thing to leave in there so we can handle situations that might arise. But these funds would help, again, offset the impacts. And between these funds and the capital funds, we may be able to keep these crucial jobs, TMS athletics, clubs and activities, and things like that. There would still have to be reductions, but they would not be as severe if we can utilize the UISF funds for what they say in the agreement they can be utilized for, and reconsider the use of those capital funds. The UISF agreement contains the language under Section 5 that it can be used for potential exposure to excessive seasonal shifts in utility costs, which is exactly what happened. So between these two, we would be able to hopefully restore a number of the positions, TMS athletics, and the clubs and activities, as well as maybe a few other things to make the impact of this budget season not as severe because of that insurance increase. So we're not just coming tonight to say boo-hoo here because everybody has presented a very difficult situation. We're coming to present solutions. Offered respectfully, and that's all that I have.
Thank you, Dr. Will. Can I just ask that a copy of these slides be sent like ASAP to council, particularly for me? I can't really see them from back there and I like to look at them.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate that. Okay. I believe that brings us to item 5 of our agenda, which is a general discussion of what has been presented tonight. So I'll open the floor up. I'll ask if Vice Chair Moran and Chairman Holtz can help me direct traffic here. I'll try to do my best, but it's a little difficult to see.
No, I'm staying.
Yeah, we're making eye contact.
Yeah.
Well, oh, yeah, that's not real loud. Okay. Well, part of the year back there. So again, welcome everybody and those that spoke last night did a great job. And we're glad we're continuing the public session tomorrow. So if more people need to speak, that want to speak, there's that opportunity. I appreciate Dr. Willett, you sharing these great solutions. I look forward to actually having them in front of me, so I can really look at them. Because I did jot down some maybe ideas, but it sounds like you've already come to some really great ones. I just want to mention, we did get an email from a writer, and this is just an idea because I guess other towns do it. So we have an integrated preschool. I guess some towns do charge a fee. I don't know how that works. And that creates a big revenue into the school system. So I'm not sure if the board has ever talked about that. Maybe not this year, but next year. It might be just not perfect, but it's another way to get some sort of a source for revenue to the school system. Affect a lot of things. Since it sounds like clubs and sports are going to be okay. Maybe. Maybe. Right. But I was gonna say, I didn't know that none of these are perfect, they're just ideas. That I didn't know if like some middle school sports could play with like JV sports, if that's an option, so they don't miss out on an extra club. If that's an option that could be considered as well. And I know the 1% has gone up to the 2%, I guess now. And right, there used to be 1% with the town. I think just recently it's 2% and it doesn't have to come to the council anymore, which is great. So I'm not really too sure on all the ins and outs on that. I don't know, Tony, or Dr. Willett. Can you use that now on anything, or is it still very prescribed to certain things?
Yeah, it's under 10248A. You can use it for anything. You can put up to 2% at the end of every year. Tricky part about it is when you do have an end of year balance.
Yeah.
You have to wait until the audit is complete. So in 1 year, you couldn't really use that immediately for the next year because you're not sure until the audit is complete if that amount is available.
Yeah.
So it's usually available in the third quarter of the following year, in which case it could then be transferred into the ERF, up to 2%. Yeah, the ERF fund currently, though, for the board is heavily utilized to try to offset this budget even. So it would have, last we looked, if we use it for what we were saying, potentially they might use it for, there'd be 19,000 left in there. Potential.
All right.
They have to, they make decisions that are different from that.
And I know bus transportation, I did listen to, do actually try to listen to the recorded meetings, even at our own town council meetings, I have to go back and listen to if it's anything. I know, for the member, but you saw brought up about bus transportation. Could you go over how much savings, because if I listen correctly, it sounds like it could be a charge back if we reduce 2 buses, is that correct?
The way that it's set up, and the companies do this because they contract for a certain number of buses, so they also have to plan for that. So after a certain number, if you reduce buses, there is a kind of penalty for reducing the bus that offsets some of the costs that you may gain back of doing that. So I can give you the exact amount in a minute. I'd have to look it up because I'm just sending that. It's about 100,000, 114,000 would be saved by reducing 2 more routes. The Board of Ed reduced 2 routes in the last budget cycle and would be reducing an additional 2 routes. And it would be roughly 100,000, a little more than that. I have to check it out. That would be brought back in the budget for that. The downside is that many people may remember about 2 years or 3 years ago, one of the main priorities of the board was to make transportation better and not have as many late buses and so on. We'd be going back to more what we had before with respect to the number of routes and buses.
What was the cost savings from that?
It's about 100,000. I'll give you the exact amount in a minute. I just want to send this over to the council.
It's those are just my questions or now, but I also just want to add, I'm honestly asking every question of the town manager's office, like Brian and copied Chris and Jacob, so they see them. I'm trying to turn over every rock, trying to understand everything. So I just want people to know, not just go along and actually asking every question, even if it's already been asked in the budget, so I have it with me in front of me, and that Chris can share to his caucus and Jacob can to his as well. That's all I have.
Good.
Thank you, Counselor. You get a check. Were you complete with your remarks?
Yes, I was. Thank you, Jacob.
Councilman Murray, I think Jen had a answer for Charlie.
Yeah, I just. Colleen,
Yep.
can you,
Go right ahead.
can you clarify your?
Joke.
Colleen, can you clarify your question on sports on the team? I'm sorry, I missed what you asked.
No,
about the
it was
team.
just a suggestion. Yeah, no, it's not real perfect, but it's just a suggestion. So, I was just saying that maybe middle schoolers would play eighth grade, seventh grade, whatever it is, can play freshman ball or JV.
Oh, for the high school.
You know what I mean? I believe we did that in Massachusetts. Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's still at least something.
Okay, I don't know what I know right now, my son is on the Froshmore baseball team and his games are starting at 2:30. I think that would be difficult for middle school, but I'm not sure what that looks like and juggling and readjusting schedules.
The way to save, it's another way to save.
Well, and just to kind of tag in, and I think Brian had brought up more in line with the bus and the transportation type savings. You know, some of the options of adjusting schedules, which would be in line. You know, one of the issues or the challenges with adjusting it right now has to do with sports and some of the requirements as far as when the games could begin. That's not saying that idea is nix. It's more saying that that's not an option for this one, that it's something the district needs to take a little time, look over all those dynamics and see how we would adjust those and how we would get those scheduled. So it's more a question for the next budget cycle or the one after that as far as a possibility, but not a bad idea, just one that has to go in the parking lot.
Jacob, I think Brian, did you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap around the financial numbers. Jacob, what was the numbers that you had put forward as possibilities? I know everything in here is possibilities, but what were the numbers that you had mentioned in your beginning presentation of possible solutions?
Sorry, are you talking to me, Brian?
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. So I wasn't laying out more solutions, it's just kind of laying the current state of things. Were you looking for like budget percent increases or the property tax increases?
Yeah, I thought you had mentioned in one of the slides that you had put forward some sort of solution numbers or something that you had come across.
Oh, maybe it was what we're already using from the funds. Correct me if I'm going down a road that isn't what you wanted, but the current proposed budget by the town manager, which, you know, as we know, has not been voted on or adopted, but what's currently in there includes $300,000 from unassigned fund balance, plus an additional $226,000 from the fund balance specifically for one-time capital expenditures, and it also includes $300,000 from the tax stabilization fund, which is the maximum that we can possibly take from that fund per ordinance. So we're utilizing $826,000 between those funds. In the proposed budget. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
At the end, Jacob, at the end, you said that, so you had some possible solutions as well. You talked about maybe assuming a 99.1%.
Oh,
tax
you know,
rate. So
you're right.
I think, right.
yeah.
You're right. You know, I'm sorry. I've been up since 6, working since 6 earlier, up earlier than that. Sorry. So yes, so we are looking at a few different ideas. One proposal that has been floated, and I want the council to deliberate, if they're so inclined tomorrow, is to assume that we're going to get the ECS funding. So in the current governor's proposed budget, they're assuming a $300,000 cut to Tolland, which would be something that we would have to make up for. What we could do, because according to our state legislators, it looks likely that we're not going to get cut, that will be reversed. Again, it's not guarantee, but it looks likely, we could assume that we're going to get a $300,000, which would help us from a revenue perspective. And then if things didn't pan out, then there was a shortfall in that amount, we would have to use our fund balance to cover that amount. So that's one solution or potential idea. The other two were assuming a 99.1% tax collection rate, which is a bit higher than what we currently assume. That's because our current assumptions in the town manager budget is less than the actuals that we've actually collected over the past 3 years. So that's good. We're collecting more of the grand list than we initially anticipated, so we should take a little credit for it. That's would be what I would propose to council. And then the last thing is actually already going to be part of the solution, which is we are going to be assessing our motor vehicles differently. So they depreciate less quickly per the tax schedule. So that increases the value of the grand list by 15 million, which it's relatively modest impact, but it does decrease the proportion that homes make up of the grand list. So that will help your home tax bill a little bit. In that way. So those are some ideas that we are thinking about.
Thanks so much. And
Yep.
Dr., what was the portion of those two solutions that you had put forward on your slide there with the energy fund and also the
568, 568.
568? Well,
Should
the
roughly-
potential 300. I'm just trying to do some math there.
Yep.
You can move on if someone else has something to say.
I have something.
All right, thank
Just a
you.
point of clarification. So on your possible reductions, is DECA and trauma included? Because I didn't see them on the list.
Close.
Clubs. Okay.
You said it again, please, Alex. That's because we can't hear you.
I was asking Dr. Willett, because I didn't see the DECA or drama listed in the clubs being.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that for those of you that don't, I appreciate all the students that came out last night. And the parents. For those of you that don't know me, I spent my Saturdays all conference in football, and then my Fridays in Heights singing for the prestigious Madrigals group, all acapella group here in town. I was 1 out of 30 tenors to be selected for Eastern Regional's choir. Frank Sinatra and guys and doll. I mean, the list goes on. So I'm not the one to play with when it comes to being threatened that we're taking our kids' drama. I feel like my chips have been taken off of the table because what everyone knows what I'm most passionate about and fervent about has seemingly sounding like it's going to disappear, which is public safety for our children. So I wanted to make the statement last night to thank those that have come out here to speak. I appreciate your fervent opinions. But I think number one, if you guys, the second I hear that public safety is back for our school kids, you'll have me re-interested again. Because right now I'm pretty frustrated with that. It's been a long time coming. It seemed like it took more than a year, and now that's gone. So.
And just a point of clarification, we're in no way are the proposed or the suggested list of reductions a threat. We're not trying.
I didn't say that.
When you did.
You
did
did.
actually.
Sorry. In no
When
way.
did I say that it was a threat?
You said I'm
About
not the one to
45.
play
Check.
with our
I got it.
It's okay, it's okay. You probably didn't mean it that way, but.
Yeah, that's not-
That we're threatening to take away.
Let me please.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
what I was
Right.
getting at.
So, and that's a clarification I'd like to make. We're not making threats. We're not putting together a list to scare, to intimidate, to move people. What we're trying to do is show that to get from the budget the budget request that we put in to the number that is currently proposed, reductions have to be made. When we start looking at all of the costs associated with running the district, and we start asking the questions, what minimizes the impact to teaching the core things? I mean, we want to teach everything. We want to offer every opportunity that not only we currently have, but moving forward, but that costs money. If that money isn't there, where do we start making reductions? And those are the things
So
that are
where
there.
were those
No, no,
solutions
if I may
2 nights ago?
if I may
The
finish.
seats sound great and,
Yeah, Counselor Noonan, if you could just give Chairman Holt an opportunity to respond, then I'll give you an opportunity to follow up with any remarks that you have.
None of the items there were chosen with any particular person, any particular motivation. Again, it's looking at where effects can be minimized that those came up with. The decisions haven't been made. To reiterate, we've talked about these, we've discussed these. Our intent here is to bring this information to the council so that you guys can use that in part of your deliberation, not to threaten. Thank you.
Counselor Noonan, did you want to follow up or respond in any way?
question was, where were the 2 solutions that we were just shown, where were those 2 nights ago?
So 2 things. Where did you get that SRO, that security or SROs were on the cut list?
I had read a post on one of our correspondent pages online that said that school safety was coming off of the priority list.
So that's not what's here. The SRO is still in the budget, that there's still roughly 1 SRO would still be there. And again, when you have 1.9 million of reductions, there's a list of things that get from the point of 7.34 to 2.99. So the board did its best and was trying to figure out what to do. This was the result of me looking at everything I could possibly think of and, running it by the chairs before I came in. What you're getting were what the board was trying to struggle with, and everything that's there is what it would take to get from 7.34 down to 2.99. So this is a summary of it. That's what they were chewing on, and that's what was available when you had your meeting the other night. But, there wasn't an opportunity to be accessed either. Nobody asked me any questions about that.
Yeah.
So, and this does point though, those things require town council. So the UISF fund is a Board of Ed fund, but it requires the council. The council would have to act in order for those funds to be allocated, which is why it wasn't something immediately on the table. It's not something the board can do by itself.
I think those 2 implementations will be well receptive by council. I just would like this to be, and I've talked to a couple other of my counselors on council. I would like this to be a more holistic group experience here. Because if we're going to start saying Republicans don't care about schools, I'll just say Democrats don't care about school safety. Is that true? Because if that's not true, then I would like facts to be spoken, and I would like to do this as a group. So I'm going to take a couple
Well,
breaths.
Counselor, yeah,
Then I'd
Counselor-
yeah.
yeah. No, I think tonight we can have a good conversation about how we are approaching our solutions. I think we can review what the Board of Ed has submitted and see what we can do to mitigate any impacts. Yep. I'll go to Board of Education member Gallichan.
Thank you. So to start, I'm going to, I guess, avoid meeting with the same energy. However,
Louder.
I'm going to avoid meeting Mr. Noonan with the same initial energy. However, I'm very frustrated too. I'm glad that you're frustrated. I think that we're all frustrated. And in terms of chips on the table, all of my chips are off the table. I don't want any of these cuts, and no one is surprised at that. I want to clarify that you made several statements about safety. So I hope you understand that it's important for me to clarify these things as well.
Absolutely.
So the first is that you said that it had taken more than a year. So you were frustrated that we were removing safety. The implication of that is that you're discussing the 2 part-time positions that we had for an SRO that we couldn't fill, and we wanted to make it to a full-time position. That has taken a very long time. That was not under the Board of Education's control. We did everything we could from our side, and we met about that. 2, the Board of Ed didn't have a meeting 2 nights ago. And at our last meeting, we didn't know if we were going to have the opportunity to speak to you again. So this was the first time we could present any solutions. So, and then I want to say this. Well, I also want to touch the fact that I don't think Democrats are saying that Republicans don't care about children, and I don't think Republicans should say that Democrats don't care about safety.
Agreed.
I've been very vocal in my meetings that I do care very much about safety. The entire board, bipartisan, completely, every single member has said they care very much about safety.
Good.
I have also added that school safety is not simply just about school security. And I've been very vocal that that is why I am pushing for things like a social worker, because the research shows that those things are actually more important than having armed personnel in the school. So I want to cover all of it when we talk about safety.
Sure.
I also have 2 students in the school, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing that I think it's important to touch on is that, and I thank you for taking back the comments that you said that you were threatened.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you. There's 74 line items of reductions, okay? 32 were in our in the first adopted budget, right? The rest are in this. Potential reductions, sorry. So these reductions, they touch every student in some way. That's actually the issue we had the other night in our meeting, right? Every path we went down to try to say, what could we do here? What could we do here? It just led to something else, right? It trickled down. It affected everything. Now, 2 groups of students came out in mass last night, right? Drama and DECA. And I'm so proud of them for doing so and supporting each other and doing so. But the reality is that there's a lot of reductions. There's a lot of clubs and activities, TMS athletics. Heck, maybe it was a little too late for the TMS kids to come out and ask for their athletics. I know how important athletics at the middle school was for my son, but I chose not to bring him last night. We've also gotten, I think Colleen reported you guys yesterday got 70 emails or so.
Yes.
Okay. We got more last night during the meeting. We got more today. I know I'm on some of the ones that you guys are on. You probably got more. So in those emails and in the discussions from parents, students, and staff last night, we did hear about a lot of other things. So yeah, would I have like 20 math students to talk about like how classes of 28 in the high school are affecting them? Yep, I would have. They didn't come last night. Would I have liked TMS athletics to come last night? Sure. Would I have liked, I think you saw the email that we received from our nursing coordinator. There are so many students who rely upon going into that nurse's office and getting care every day, all day. And I'm sure there's a lot of concerned parents that when their child goes in, diabetic issue, that now we're not going to be able to have staff get to them really quickly, right? So there's so many kids affected. There's so many parents affected. We are getting that feedback. It's just that those wonderful children showed up the most to support it. That doesn't mean that we said drama and DECA. We said there's a potential to cut every single club and activity with a total of $130,000.
Thank you for that, Claire. Last night was very confusing. So that is helpful to me. And I appreciate it. So do you think that what Walt has given tonight with those 2 fixes, do you think that might?
I am really,
helpful to-
is he asking?
Finish your question, sir.
The 2 proposes, the seats and the, you could pull it back up. Dr. Rowe. The use it, do we think that those could be possible fixes for some of the aforementioned possible cuts?
Yes, I think so, because I think it fits. And I'm sorry that, I'm projecting my voice, so I have to make it louder. I'm not yelling here. I only have one setting.
I appreciate it, Dr. Willett. It's hard to hear.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
well, so, in my opinion, that's what the UISF fund was set up for, partially was to offset exactly the situation we're in. So the reason though it's here is that it does require town council approval. It's a Board of Ed fund, but this would require the council to say, go ahead, which would be helpful. And I would have to leave it up to, the wisdom and knowledge of the town manager about the capital fund with respect to that. If that was possible though, if we were able to do that, and then we could cover it with our ERF in third quarter, we'll be able to get both done. The reason why we can't cover it with ERF now is even if we had under funds, we wouldn't have access till the third quarter. So that's why we would need to swap these. And if that's possible, between these two things, in my opinion, we'd be able to save crucial jobs, the athletics, and at least the clubs and activities. There are other things that will still be cut, but those core things we would try to go to them first. In my opinion, I think that's what people would want us to go to. It'll be ultimately the board's decision, not mine.
Jacob, Vice Chair Galashan.
I just wanted
Yep.
to,
Go ahead.
it sounded like Alex was asking our opinion and I'm glad he asked. I think that they're great, right? I think that we have to look for things. Are they optimal? Do I want to push out one of our capital things for one? No, but we're all in a position here where we have to do this. I will tell you though, that this doesn't cover a lot. It's great. It's a great starting point and we can't be specific, but I have run some numbers on some of the things that really touch the students. This doesn't get us there. And it's still only a very short list compared to everything that was gone, that could be gone. So I hope that the conversation doesn't end with these two things.
All right. David, right.
Thank you.
Jacob, I have sort of a follow-on to what Vice Chair Galashan said.
Yep, go ahead.
So I want to thank the Board of Ed again and the superintendent for all the time and effort that you all put into your budget. I know how much time you spend on it, and it's definitely appreciated. You're doing what you're elected to do, which was to do what's best for our students. Well appreciated. I also want to thank you and Dr. Willett for coming with some potential solutions. I just want to note a couple of things before I ask my question. It is a fact that the Board of Ed has been underfunded for over a decade. We've talked about this numerous times, so I won't go into details, but the numbers don't lie. It's also a fact that this year's reval had a disproportionate impact on residential property values. And residents could see a tax increase even with limited budgetary increases. Unfortunately, we're in a position this year where the town might legitimately have to tighten its belt, given the impact of the reval. But because the Board of Ed hasn't been adequately funded in the last decade, our schools are not in a position to weather a difficult year because they've been doing that for the last 10 years. So I think, like all of the counselors have, we've been spending time trying to think about alternative sources for funding or trying to meet all the needs of the town departments, but especially the Board of Ed, given its history of inadequate funding. So my question to the Board of Ed, any of you is this: if the council wasn't able to, meet your fully fund your Board of Ed request, is there some number or something tangible you could help us understand that would help you meet the most essential things that you think are important off the list? Is there somewhere, that we can meet? I guess I'm looking for some guidance for what would be most helpful. What does the board, need if we can't get to 7%, 8%?
And I appreciate the question, Vice Chair Moran, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Willett in just a minute. But, that question is really the purpose of what we asked for this, when we requested to have this conversation, was to put in front of the council those potential reductions again, not as, this is what we have to do, but as saying, you know, we've gone through, we've reduced from, what would that perfect number be for us to maintain services and to advance in a couple areas, which was about 11%. Reducing that down to, okay, what do we need to do to protect critical resources such as, you know, staff, arts, programs, you know, those kind of things, while absorbing some reductions. And that's where we come up with the 7 number. The possible reductions here are meant to show the council, okay, if we go lower, this is what we have to do. Not saying that, you know what, going from a 7 to a 6.5 means this. That's not necessary. And so it's difficult to tell you that drop dead number is a 5.2 or a 6.3, whatever, because we did again have to go back and say, okay, if the reduction is 300,000, where do we find that? How do we find that? Is 300,000 a temporary thing that we could find? Maybe. The 1.8, 1.9 million was too much to absorb potentially, which is why you start seeing some of those long-term cuts and reductions happening. So all that just to say, we're not trying to avoid giving that number. It's just that it's very difficult to pinpoint that without turning back around and seeing how the dominoes start to work.
Sure, and just so that you know where I'm coming from, I completely appreciate that the board has to make those determinations about what, you know, how you ultimately allocate money once it's decided and all of that. But just so you know, my perspective, I think Councilor Buckler at our last rec meeting had sort of tried to ask, you know, I think for all of the Board of Ed, just to sort of get some idea, some consensus as to where everyone felt like the budget should end. And so again, I get that, you know, I'm trying to ask you a broader question that doesn't drill down into all the specific things that you all have to make really difficult decisions about. It just, I guess I'm asking for purposes of our conversation tomorrow night. You know, any insight you can give us in that regard is helpful. Not that I'm holding you to a specific number or anything, just, you know, just trying to get an idea. So I understand you can't answer that.
So let me just reiterate your question just to make sure that Dr. Willett got it over here, and then I'll turn the mic over to him here. But essentially, Dr. Willett, what I think he's asking is that tomorrow, when the council goes in deliverance and they start working, if they can't make the, you know, 7%, but they end up somewhere lower, do we have a gut feel as to where that critical point is?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, I think for me, and this question, if it's being answered by me, I'll tell you where I think the critical point is. You know, I think that everybody might have a different view of what the critical point is. For me, the critical point is retaining staff, because again, as I said, in a difficult insurance year, one of the biggest tragedies could be that, you know, it's the staff that serve the students. The students benefit greatly by what the staff provides, and, you know, if we have staff reduced because of that in a year where maybe we wouldn't have to do it, you know, in another year, I would like to have that be the first line, so that, you know, because it's the interventionist that teaches the child or helps the child with dyslexia. You know, it's the classroom teacher in kindergarten with class sizes as they are, or 1 or 2, you know, that makes things possible for those kids. Not having reading instruction and not having the right kind of instruction or help can impact a child all the way through their whole school career. So to me, it's staff. And I think that, you know, when looking at all of this, if the town council and the board, you know, can work together on it, and I think that would be a great opportunity for every year that, you know, we have this chance to work together, that the use of these UISF funds and the capital reallocation would provide about that 568, which would cover most of the staff that would have been reduced, as well as some of these other things. Those stipends that are clubs are also things that are provided to staff. So that's why it all kind of goes together. So if that's something that can be done, I think it will make a big, big difference. And I understand that in a very difficult budget year, there's not a lot of options with respect to putting more of a burden on the tax base. This would put no additional burden on the tax base. It's existing funds that are already there or were already allocated for a purpose. It fits under what the town manager's request was.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Will, and I also appreciate, exploring ways that are not gonna impact or not gonna increase taxes. I think that's something that we need to seriously be talking about tomorrow night is, what, we have this unassigned fund balance, rainy day fund, sort of at one of those rainy days. I think that's something we'll explore. We don't have to get into that necessarily tonight, but, yeah, but thank you. I appreciate your.
Can I answer?
Yeah,
Jacob, can I answer?
Yes, and then I'd like to speak if it's okay, but if you're just responding, I'll go ahead.
I can say this, Chris, and I'm in no way making any decisions for any board members or anything like this, but to answer this personally, with the numbers that I've looked at from what the Board of Ed saw the other night, in order to retain, my goal would be, well, my minimum goal would be at least to retain the 5 teaching positions, to add the social worker, to add the SRO, to add athletics back, to add student clubs and activities, to add pathways back, and to add the MTSS stipends, which are the intervention stipends. That, at a minimum, would be about 1.5%.
Can I clarify? You would want to add the second SRO
Correct.
Yeah,
The additional SRO.
because
thank you.
the SRO and security officers are in.
The SRO that was proposed in our adopted budget.
This would be the second.
Thank you.
and you said, sorry, 1.5%, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask clarify question? 1.5%, like to the town manager's proposed budget for Board of Ed, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't.
On top of the 2.99.
Right,
Yeah.
Which are,
Yeah.
But with
Yeah.
taking out the 568, right?
then that would not be 1.5%, Rainey. What I have is about
I'm trying to follow the
700,
math too, I'm not.
what I have is about $740,000.
So
This-
add $740,000 to the proposed budget that the town manager has presented for Board of Ed. Minus the 500.
And minus the 500?
That's me simply saying, if I could have more than the 2.99%, this is what I would
so
have.
the additional cost on the 2.99 is 740,000. If you want to take that out of the 740,000, then it's less 568. 740 minus 568.
200, and some change.
Right.
But again, that's merely my,
Understood, I'm just trying to do the math.
Yeah.
It's a
A little less than 200,000 more.
Okay.
So an additional, again, I'm not holding anyone to, it, but an additional $200,000 with these
With these.
implemented with at least help, yeah, for your. specific-
Per vote.
Yep.
like, I did not have a nurse on this, but yeah. I,
So can I just make a quick comment? Oh, well, Jacob has.
I apologize, there was an email sent in earlier, nurse. I had asked her if it was the nurse, on this proposal, that she, her figure to add a nurse back in.
Okay. And that was the TIS? I don't even, is there TIS nurse?
I don't think we specified,
Okay, so this is in general,
we specified.
there's a nurse on the.
It would affect 3 schools. The nurse reductions would affect 3 schools if we went forward with them.
Thank you, and again, just to reiterate, like, I understand that we're not talking about ideal situations for anyone. And I also understand that I'm not, asking for the board to like speak in one unified voice. So I'm just looking for perspective, so thank you for all that.
Thank you on that point.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to ask a question here, so I'll make a comment first. So first, I just want to thank the Board of Ed for coming forward with these 2 solutions. I think this has been a good discussion, and there's certainly something I would be interested in looking into further. But I did want to ask, just I know I've got Brian in the room. I don't know if we have our finance director. Have these ideas been run by our finance department? They haven't?
Typing literally an email to her right now, asking her, and Mike, all right, human
Okay.
resource. To discuss Yusuf tomorrow, the capital idea, but we have other things going, but knowing how Yolanda is, she'll be working on this soon.
Okay.
So I'm literally typing it as we speak. I'll CC, Dave and Chris.
Jacob, in that sense, and like I said, Dr. Willett was brainstorming and coming up with ideas. I think we got the text about 5:45 saying, I have a couple ideas. Do you mind if I present them during this? And the expectation is even after, all the way up to the point when the first bell rings, you know, that our staff is going to continue to look to try to turn article. So this isn't the end.
No, it's not a slight that they haven't been presented. I just wanted to know if our town staff had any opinions or input. And it looks like we'll probably have that tomorrow night in time for our budget deliberations, but certainly something I would be interested in exploring further. I guess one other question to Brian. So if we were to go forward with this, both of these items they're a little outside the regular budget process, but I would assume we would need to include that in any budget motion if we were to proceed with, say, a use of transfer or swapping out capital items in any motion tomorrow night.
There's gonna be I think there'll be a lot of that, and we would have to include that, yes. Because I know that we have some stuff too, that you mentioned, so there's gonna be some moving around.
Okay.
And we'll be preparing for that all day tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, just wanted to give a clarification. But that's all. I'll go to whoever wants to speak next. Is there anybody?
Council Bibi?
Council Beatty?
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank everybody for their questions and for the input. This has been really useful. I just need to, so as I mentioned before, so this is my first budget season. It's a little unusual that we think we might get $300,000 that is currently not allocated by the state for educational cost sharing. However, if we do get that money, that would just go into the general fund, right? It wouldn't be routed to the Board of Education.
Right, ECS goes to town.
Okay. So, just wanted to make clear that even if we do get that money, it won't necessarily end up in the Board of Education's budget. We have, and I have participated in discussions about this before, and I don't really understand it. We have a fund called an Educational Reserve Fund. That is another sort of like reserve fund, like the tax stabilization fund, like the unassigned fund balance. So we have several of these funds. The Educational Reserve Fund needs town council approval for the Board of Education. Is it?
Not at this time. In the past, it was Ordinance 86, Chapter 8, that
Okay.
managed it, but it was replaced by the state statute 10248A.
Okay,
So now, no, but in
okay,
the past, yes. But
So-
that fund would be at $19,000 if we use the things that are possible to use to offset this budget.
okay. So the state law changed to allow boards of education to have control
To
over
have
that.
that autonomy over.
Very recent.
2%, yeah.
Thank you. That was, thank you. And then, one of the questions I had, because I know we talked about, it's important for us to maintain our a rainy day fund, which we call the unassigned fund balance. Because it affects our bond ratings, which are currently at the highest level. So I guess this question would probably be for Yolita, but I'm gonna throw it to Brian, the town manager. So do the bonding agencies or bond rating agencies look at all of our surplus funds as an aggregate when they look at how effective we are at funding a rainy day account?
I don't think as an aggregate is accurate, but they look at everything. All the fund policies, how we spend them,
Okay,
everything. So
okay,
it's more granular than aggregate.
right, so it's.
But absolutely,
Right, so so they look at like the tax stabilization fund and they look at and they look
Yes.
like, okay, and you have.
and our policies, and then
Yes,
how we say towards the policies, yes, it's very in depth.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Yep.
So I assumed that was. So, but now you confirm it, thank you. I think I'm gonna yield the floor right now. I might have a couple of questions later, but thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Beebe. I'll go to anyone else who has questions or comments. Are there any hands, Chairman Holt or Vice Chair Moran? Sorry, I don't know who spoke, but you have the floor.
I was just identifying Counselor Butler.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jacob. So first, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I'm glad that we have the second meeting. I think it's been really helpful tonight. You know, there's a lot of feeling involved from people in town. But I think in general, everybody here has their heart in the right place. I know that there's been, some people who've been upset with the town manager's proposed budget. It's as if, from the Board of Ed standpoint. I think that his heart was in the right place when he proposed that. I think he was trying to propose something that was fair, that took things into consideration and took the town into consideration, but, you know, he didn't have a crystal ball and he wasn't aware of what impact that would have to the Board of Ed, and what things would be on the chopping block, not on the chopping block, or, you know, in general, what, from listening to the discussions about what was being cut, it sounded like there were a lot of things that were being taken into consideration, but it had kind of this snowball effect. So, you know, you consider reducing something, but then that affects something else or affects another program or affects, and those are types of things that the town council, the town manager, we can't really understand because we're not dealing with this every single meeting. We're not discussing the Board of Ed or what the Board of Ed does. We're not discussing the schools every single meeting. I guess my general question was, when we're discussing these things, I think we've come to a place of more of an understanding of where the Board of Ed is. And maybe some ideas that wouldn't quite deviate as much from what has been proposed by the town manager, but are just kind of thinking outside the box to kind of give you guys a little bit more wiggle room. But is there anything in general that you can think of that we can take into consideration tomorrow night when we're discussing this? Or any suggestions that haven't been made tonight that may make the process easier for you guys to discuss how you're going to allocate those funds? I know it's a very general question, but basically I want to know, what don't we know that we haven't discussed already? That might be helpful when we're all discussing things tomorrow night.
Excuse me. And that's a great question, Councilor. I wish I had a very succinct answer. I think you summed it up beautifully when you said that the items tend to snowball. You know, when we'd had it in our last meeting ourselves, as we went through, you know, Dr. Willett's list of proposed places where reductions could be made. And, you know, we said, well, why can't you just cut some money from here? Why can't you just take it from here? And he tried to sit down and explain, you know, even to us, and we've spent a lot of time in the schools, a lot of discussions, but try to explain how if I pull on this string, you know, for something as small as, you know, a subscription to, you know, a reading program that we think is only used here, we take that away and now that has to be replaced by something. And now the training that was involved to get the teachers to that point, that training has to be replaced, or it has to be moved down the road and we have to look to our neighbors for help. There's a lot of things that are involved such that when we kick our ideas to Dr. Willett and staff, it takes a couple of days for them to run those bases and come back. And so the purpose, and I think tonight went wonderfully, and it's going wonderfully, and I want to, you know, extend, as Brian said, you know, there's going to be conversations, and you guys are going to be doing ideas all the way through tomorrow. Feel free and offer, you could reach out to me and I can get the information back to you. But our goal is to make sure you know everything we can feed you before you have to make your vote. That, you know, an educated decision is the best decision here.
And I think that's what I was trying to touch upon with my question is there anything that we haven't touched upon tonight that we need to discuss or we should discuss that, you know, maybe help with tomorrow? Are there any ideas that as we're sitting here, any of the Board of Ed members could think of maybe an outside the box approach to, you know, saving a little bit more money or adding a little bit more funds to something? I think this is one of those situations where, as time goes on and things progress and we take into consideration, what people say in town, you know, sometimes we think of additional things that, you know, we look back and go, gosh, I wish we discussed that, or I wish we brought that up. So I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything that anyone can think of that we have not discussed that could be helpful when we're discussing tomorrow night.
Let me turn to the other board members. Anything? Jada?
I appreciate your question, and it's a good question. I don't have what you're looking for out of that question. I do have something else, in the sense of, I think I made myself Mr. Clear last week, Mr. Town Manager, to the board, to the council. I made myself pretty clear that I was pretty frustrated, not with our process and how we went about, you know, I'm consistently impressed by our group and our willingness to sort of throw things aside and say, what are the facts? What's the objective truth here? What do we need to provide for our schools and the kids, students sitting in the audience? The best answer I have for you, Jen, or Ms. Buckler, is I hope at the bare minimum that the solutions that are on that screen right now that Dr. Willett sent over are simply at least bare minimum considered. That's what I'm asking as a Board of Education member, as somebody who didn't put the effort into this. It wasn't my effort that went into this. It was our superintendent's. And there's more to it than just that. I mean, you know, we've had a joint meeting before. I planned on being at the last meeting in person. There were some complications there, but you know, even during that meeting, the difference in how I felt leaving that meeting and even how I feel now is pretty grand. And the conversation that was held last meeting was very one direction. It was very here to here and not much back and forth. And so this meeting, I'm sensing this willingness from both sides here, both the council and the Board of Ed, to say, well, let's find a solution here. There's got to be a solution. These students, look, I was a DECA kid. I know there's a bunch of DECA kids in the audience. I was a class officer, right? I was very involved in the morning announcements. I don't know if anybody here is on the morning announcements out there and whatnot. Yeah, I see you. I see you. You know, I take a lot of pride in those things. I mentioned last week during last week's meeting that it's not just the club, right? It's not just the what you're doing in DECA. We're learning handshakes today. That was always my favorite meeting, the handshake meeting, you know, event to the point where we're running that meeting. You know, we're learning these things. Great, awesome, wonderful. But again, like I mentioned last week, if you go on that website, you'll find hundreds of scholarship opportunities, hundreds of links that lead to job opportunities, college support items and whatnot. I just hope. And by the way, that's one club, that's one subject, that's one line item, one piece in one line item. There's a lot here, and I wish you guys could see the screen I'm looking at right now, because there's a lot here. I can't necessarily get into it all just yet, because again, nothing's official. But what I hope to get out of this meeting, what I hope before we leave, is that tomorrow at 6:30 or 7, I forget when you guys, 6:30 it got moved to as of last night, that the counselors in this room and not, the counselors in this meeting and not, are taking everything that has been discussed over the last 4 or 5 months, especially the last 4 or 5 weeks, into account. And that's my hope. And so, and that also includes the town manager, just like the superintendent puts effort into sort of reaching both sides here and trying to find compromises. I know the town manager is putting a lot of effort into doing the same. But at some point, I need to see, as you know, not just as a Board of Ed member, but as a resident, like the people sitting in the, I need to see that. And so I made myself very clear last week, I was frustrated as a Board of Education member, but put that aside for a second. As a resident, I asked Mr. Holt last week, because he was somebody who was affected by the buses. The transportation issue, and not to put your business out there, and whatnot. But I can deal with getting 90 emails. I'll read through those and and I can deal with that. What I can't stand is that we've got solutions on the table, right here, bang, right here. And prior to the budget cycle starting, that would help not just the parents in that situation, but the children who are not getting home till dinner. So it's basic. I talked about two items. One club in the club's line item and the buses just now. Those are two issues. There's a couple dozen, few dozen, if not hundreds, that have not even been discussed, that haven't gotten discussed like they deserve to be discussed. And so I really hope that we have not wasted the public's time tonight, that we have not wasted each other's time tonight, that we don't cast stones at one another for the rest of this process, that we figure this out, because there's got to be a solution in here somewhere. And so what that solution is, to answer your question, I wish I knew off the top of my head. But up to this point, I feel that my colleagues and I on the Board of Ed have done a pretty splendid job, at least mapping out how we feel the school should be funded. So that's the best answer I got for you. I wish I had more and more specific, but that's what I have for you right now.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point. I mean, we've never done this before. We had a second joint budget meeting where we had the proposed, town manager budget, and then you guys discussed what would that mean for Board of Ed, and then we got back together and we discussed, okay, what are some potential solutions for some of the issues that are very tricky to navigate? Because really it should be a collaboration between the Board of Ed and the town council. And I think there's been something proposed by both sides that they're not unreasonable. I think it's something that, it's not going to break the bank. And I think it's combining being financially responsible with, trying to find a way to meet the needs of the Board of Ed, because you guys are the ones that are sitting here trying to decide, how are we gonna make this work for the kids? And that's a hard thing to do, and we should make it easier to navigate for you if it's possible. So I think we have a lot of solutions tonight. I'm looking forward to discussing those tomorrow night, and I think a lot of us are really on the same page with what we want to see. And which is good, it's a good starting point when you're on the same page as somebody else. So I really hope the town council takes these things into consideration tomorrow night and we're discussing instead of just kind of throwing it out and going, okay, we're gonna start over here. Because I think we're at a really good point now between the Board of Ed and the town council, and it is a better discussion than it was at the last meeting. So thank you for your answer.
And I just want to say one thing to Jake and I agree. I think this meeting has been more of like a dialogue between our two boards. I think that's been great. And just from the perspective of, I think, as you said, I think the Board of Ed is doing great work. I really believe that the town council is trying to do that, right? So I've had great conversations with, my own caucus. I've had great conversations with Councilor Noonan about things that are important to him and his caucus, things that are important to me and mine, is trying to find a place where we can come together and navigate a tricky situation. So I do have a lot of faith that the council is also trying to work collaboratively to arrive at a good, a good budget in difficult circumstances. So I appreciate what you had to say.
Question.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Jen.
Yeah, I wanted to answer Jen's question too, in terms of a lot of the things that we talk about, data points, right? Numbers on spreadsheets, all of the expertise that Dr. Willett brings in, but there's more data points that go into, the decision-making that the Board of Ed did in this process. I think one of the things that we have access to, which is great, is rounds at the schools. So, I won't belabor you with all of the details. I went over some of them in our recent meeting, but again, as data points, we just had a recent rounds at the middle school, where we looked at the unified arts programming, which is, you know, gym, music, art, technology. And that was myself and Tony and Dana. And then earlier, about a month ago, we went to Birch Grove and we looked at MTSS, which is intervention, and that was myself, Tony, Bill, Brian. So in those rounds, we have the staff there, right? We have the administration, we have curriculum supervisors and directors, we're meeting with teachers, we're meeting with students, right? So in intervention at Birch Grove, we got to see them in their math labs. We got to see, you know, the littlest guys working on their iPads with their reading intervention program. We got to see them in their small groups working with interventionists. Then we got to talk to the interventionists and the administration about how children are chosen for intervention, what their intervention rate looks like, how long they're in, if they can take everyone, if they have to turn, you know, wait on kids. You know, when we talked about, when we're with the older students, we get to actually talk to them as well. So at the middle school, we were able to sit with a group of 8 students. They talked about what was important to them. They were able to tell us what they've lost, you know, things that they've had reduced already from 6th to 8th grade that we wouldn't necessarily, you know, if you don't have a student, you might not necessarily know. They don't have elective choice in 8th grade, and I think like if they take a language, they can't take wood shop, you know, things like that. They're making choices that they were mentioning their older brothers and sisters didn't have to take. There were students talking about how they weren't interested in, you know, music, but they did music and it opened up a whole new world for them. And it's something they're looking forward to doing now in the high school and beyond. Same with art. They were asking for, you know, to expand coding options, that they're working on technology. They were talking about how they were now utilizing these things. One student in particular, he actually created the video that we looked at that saw every unified art. So he was a band member. He loved pep band. Was he a drummer?
Yeah.
Drummer, but he also was big into technology. He did, I think, things at the Wizards game, like made videos or. So we are bringing that real-time data into our discussions, you know, especially when we're talking about things like programs we might have to cut when we lose a position. Sometimes that means some of these electives go, right? They have to go first usually because they're not mandated. When we're talking about intervention, we got to see it firsthand. Teachers talked to us about, both at Birch Grove and when we had it at TIS, about how class sizes are impacting the way that they break out into intervention, into tier 1 is the classroom, tier 2 and tier 3. So we're bringing all of those data points into our deliberations too. It's not just what Dr. Willett is bringing, and it's not just the numbers on the page. It's the things that we are seeing and viewing and being presented on in the school.
And just the one thing that I want to add is, you know, one of the conversations that we had early in this was, you know, how do we get more people to engage, you know, in the process and try, you know, for good, better or for worse, you know, I would point to the emails and point to the communication that we had, not just last night, but people that are coming in today, the almost 100 people that are online right now. I mean, we have to, and this is what my point to your question, Council, is we have to look at this not as a 1-year thing. That this budget, these budgets are multi-year effects. You know, Dr. Willett brings up that we're having an extremely difficult insurance year, that we're having the reevaluation is kicking everybody in the backside, and our budgets are difficult. But if we take this and we say, you know what, we're going to underfund this year, but we'll be fine next year. We have to look at the long-term effects. I mean, we have, you look out in the audience now, I see multiple of the Hadestown shirts and stuff. And, you know, my 8-year-old asked me today if she was not going to be able to run the sets when she gets into high school because of what she's hearing there. You know, that if we have to make these reductions now, not all of them come back. So we have to, and recognizing that, you know, recognizing it's a tough year and decisions have to be made and priorities have to be made. But I just ask that we look at this from the long-term perspective. How do we do things now so that we can weather this, but still keep the things that have to be here, that have to stay? And I think what this experience has showed us is that Tolland will speak. And that we as two distinct boards, two distinct groups can come together and have conversations like this, and we can make the process.
I appreciate that. And to your point, it makes sense that this is kind of a trickle down thing. When you're underfunding for 1 year, it affects the years to come. You know, you have a lot of catching up to do if you just underfund for 1 year, but if you have issues with multiple years, you know, then you can run into a bigger pickle if you're not catching up. And to your point, I've got an 8th grader going into ninth grade. She's a theater kid. You know, she's a newsie. She asks about things all the time. She was psyched on seeing the Hadestown kids here last night. I'm sure she's psyched on seeing it tonight too. You know, and she's got a younger sister, and you want to see things. You know, most parents want to see things stay consistent. You know, I don't want my 5th grader to not have the opportunities that my current 8th grader has. You know, I think most parents feel that way. I got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. I hope that they're coming into the schools and they're going to see the same things that their sisters have right now. And I think for the most part, that's what everyone wants. You know, you want things to at least stay consistent. And so I think that was the point of my question originally was, if there's anything that the town council is doing to make that difficult, to just at least meet status quo, just to kind of keep things the way that they are, then, you know, want to hear that. And, you know, I can only speak for myself, but I'm at least open to what the Board of Ed has to say about that, because this is what you guys do. This is what you're elected to do. We weren't elected to, you know, look at the Board of Ed under a microscope. That's what you guys are going to do. And whatever you guys tell us, I'm gonna take that under advisement, because better than to tell us what's the issue. So thank you for your answer.
Dana, did you have?
Good, thanks. A lot of them last, obviously, I do appreciate having the second meeting, and I appreciate us working as a cohesive team. I think it's important that we are cognizant of what our roles are, and we're cognizant of what we are to the community. As town council, Board of Ed, planning and zoning, all of our boards and commissions working together for the whole. So I do appreciate having the second meeting. I do appreciate the back and forth collaboration versus in the past, my first Board of Ed town council meeting. I felt like we had to, that we were almost begging, right, for someone to listen to us. So, and why we have presented this for our students and our staff. And our future students and our future staff. So I think it's really important having this cohesive conversation and to continue that cohesive conversation and be united. I think it's important to appreciate those differences and viewpoints. That's how we're going to continue to flourish and get all on the same viewpoint with the staff. So again, I just want to reiterate that I appreciate it. Ms. Butler, Jen, you did use the word being financially responsible in your question. And that means thinking of, you know, financially responsible, fiscally responsible isn't necessarily cutting, taking away, reducing. It's being financially responsible. So when I first came to the Board of Ed, I asked previous board members to explain to me what the typical day of Board of Ed happened. And how to read the budget and how to understand the budget. And it's very different than writing your checkbook and budgeting your checkbook. There's recurring funds and there's things that come in and out, and there's grants and stipends and other different funding opportunities. However, when we don't fund, we're just pushing the pendulum and pushing the pendulum. So the next year, when we need those funds for something else, it looks like we're being extravagant and swinging the pendulum the other way. However, we're just trying to compensate for whatever was reduced that needs to come back in. Makes sense, right? People. So when you said financially responsible, it brought me back to page 16 of Dr. Woods, our original, superintendent proposed budget he gave us on January 8th. Our 5-year average is 1.88, which is less than the average increase any employee or any group would get, the 2.5 quote unquote average increase. Our 12-year average is 1.73. I do hear different folks in town, I do hear different folks on boards saying, well, we got a 3.3%, a 2.03, which is one of the highest we've had in decades. But if we were to have been funding 4 decades, it wouldn't have been that extravagant, it wouldn't have been that high of a swing, and we wouldn't be extremely behind. Make sense? So I want to make sure that everybody understands that there's nothing that we're asking for as a board of ed team that's extravagant. We're asking to allow us the funds, whether it be in the proposed budget, whether it be utilizing ERF, unassigned tax stabilization, different funds that we can use. And I know that there's restrictions on some of it where there's capital recurring, those kind of things. But we do have a lot of options that were proposed today by town council, by board of ed. And for these conversations, I think there's an opportunity for us to really look at Dr. Willett's original proposed budget. We have done board of ed budget as well as what our town manager provided us is just right. Find that median, that happy medium. But I think, and again, when we're talking budget, we have talking. I get that. That's real life, reality. But as a board of ed member and as a guardian of education, I've taken that to heart of what that really means to help provide our staff the tools and those resources to educate our students and to provide the resources to our students to be educated for the whole student. We've heard it in the rounds that Jen mentioned, we've been privy to. We learned, in COVID, I was able to go to the one-to-one rounds with Mary Grandy and TMS and understand why it's so important to have one-to-one technology. That was instituted because of the way that our educators communicate and the way that our students showed how they were flourishing in the classroom with them. We continue to go to those rounds. We continue to go to the community workshops, which are open to our counselors, the community, as well as the board of ed, so we can listen to our resident experts at the schools, what they need and why. There's nothing that they've said that I have heard anybody say that seems so outrageous. Everything that they say is we need this for our classes. We need this to provide this to our students. We need this for a tier 1, 2, 3 for instruction. We need this to help our students with special education. We need this to be resources for our nurses and our medical staff. We need this for our safety and security. We need this for our mental health. None of it's the flashy, sparkly car, the $200,000 vehicle, anything like that. This is what they need to flourish with their education. We had here business pathways. I think a lot about our business pathways. And we have several board members, town council, and board of ed who have recently gone through the town public school system. And I'm sure took advantage of the opportunities of the business pathways to get to where they are in their respective careers. We didn't talk a lot about Jacob and Jaden, who have probably been our most recent graduates. But even if we have a conversation where they are at their professional careers, I know that Jaden says a lot about DECA, right? DECA helped drive him and helped him focus on his mathematics, his ELA, his science, those different things because he had those resources. I can't speak for Jacob, but I'd like to have a conversation about how those business pathways helped him in his career growth now. We've seen it. No. I did, Devin talks a lot about mental health and, Counselor Newman talks about the safety and security. I think a lot of that all encompasses it. I think it's important, Jen, you asked if there's anything new. I don't think I'm saying anything new. But I'm trying to say it from a different lens and maybe a different point of view. Because what these students or what the Board of Ed presented or Dr. Bullock presented, what these students are asking, nothing is extravagant. They're asking to help them be educated, to help them become the next teacher, the next superintendent, the next safety and security officer, the next, fireman, the next policeman, whatever it might be. It's very important. We talked about the student with the videography at the middle school. It's important to understand that that student, because of that opportunity, doing those videos, he's excelling in the classroom. It's important to understand that our drama students and our theater students, maybe they're the next future folks that are going, I don't know, Barnes Scorsese or what it might be. This is opportunities for our students. So we talk about these extracurriculars, they're not fun activities. They are fun activities, right? But they're activities that get our students' wheels turning. And they're activities that get our students excited or opportunities for them to find a career path. We had the rounds at the high school, and I don't know if it was this calendar year, Jenny probably would be able to remind me, but or it was last calendar year where we sat there with the art students. And the brilliance with their ceramics and pottery and drawing and photography. And we had the valedictorian in the class. And she was utilizing her artistic abilities as well. So it was last year, it's different valedictorian. So opportunities to get into her college, to be competitive. And maybe it's not going to a university. Maybe it's going to a trade school. Maybe it's going to the military. Maybe it's going to that. But that's what all these sports, athletics, clubs, tech, DECA, drama, art, all these things, the track and field. So these are things that we can't necessarily do in the community through our rec center or through community programs. These are things that are helping build the future. Our future. And someone said it last night, I think it was a parent that said they want more for their kids than they had for themselves. I want more for my kids and these kids and these students than I had for myself. And right now, in some of in the restricted number that we're given because of the 1.73 12-year average, because of since 2019, I've been on the Board of Ed and the conversation has been reduced. We have taken away things. Things don't come back. When you take away people, you take away educators, you take away programs, you take away pathways, you take away opportunity. Again, not new what I'm saying, Jen, but I'm hoping that some of the points maybe it comes from a different direction. It's important that we support our entire community. We have opportunities to be creative as a unified team from various backgrounds and various ideas and resources that we can do what's right for all the partners. I understand the Board of Education is the biggest budget, right? It's the biggest part of the town. So when we're talking about percentages and such, what's the easiest way to streamline, right? For the biggest budget. But is that the right thing to do? Or is the right thing to do to access funds and such that us taxpayers have put money into and utilize it accordingly? So I just think we need to be resourceful with some of those things. That's what I have, and I'll be on.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, I have all of that.
Chairman Murray?
Um, I have one question to Dr. Willett. And forgive me if I'm just not remembering from your presentation earlier, but one thing, has the Board of Ed looked at potential attrition and the salary line as a potential opportunity for savings?
Yes, we worked that in. So when I interpret your use of the term attrition as if they retire, is there a differential between the higher end retired individuals and people that we might hire or employ? Yes.
Okay, and I guess maybe just one follow-up. Has there been any accounting for, positions being vacant throughout the year? I know it's a little hard to calculate, but I imagine over the past couple of years, you have like an average balance left over up in that line that might be useful to calculate. Again, understand this is a Board of Education budget, but just thinking of some opportunities potentially.
So yes, those usually are in the para-educator zone, but when we don't have a person, say, hired as a paraeducator because we post it and, not a lot of applicants are coming in, we have to still provide the services with substitutes or with contracted services. So even though we have, say, an opening, we contract with an outside service that provides a person for that job, or we have to have a sub doing it. So even though there may be some funds in those lines and other lines, we incur costs in order to provide coverage.
Thank you. All right, I don't see anybody else's hand up, so I guess I'll go. Is there anyone else who has questions or comments?
So thank you, Jemery. So just to follow on, some of what other folks said, especially about this particular, exchange here. And I personally like to see us do two things, right? I think we can watch should them at the same time. I would like us to find resources to help restore money to the Board of Education and find resources to help mitigate the tax burden on the residents, because this is, I have shown time. So this is page 71 of our book, of our budget book. This is this year, this is 40-some%, right? This is the difference, and it is unprecedented what we are experiencing in terms of the inflation of the grand list and the reduction of, or the not keeping pace with commercial properties. We've never seen this before. This is a rainy day, so we rainy day funds, it's pouring on our residents, and I think we need to do both things. And I would like us to look at ways to do that. I think this process is super useful because it gave us a chance to come together again. I would love to see us restructure our budget process to allow this to happen again in a less frenetic fashion. So I think this has been very, very useful. And so kudos to everyone for doing that. I want to emphasize the importance of the process of public engagement in this process in town government. All the documents are online. There are multiple public meetings, there are multiple public hearings. Participatory democracy is super messy, but if you don't use it, you lose it. And you're seeing that now, right? The students that have come out last night and tonight and possibly tomorrow night, last week or doing you guys, I'm older, right? I went to school in the 60s and 70s, right? Your generation, your age group, you're the people that rode on buses at the freedom riders. You are the people that protested the Vietnam War. Some of you are of the age that, so that you got out of high school, when I was still in school, when I was a freshman in high school, you were rapidly being sent to Vietnam. So the idea that you are here is totally in keeping with the history of this democracy and what is the cornerstone of our democracy. And the rubber hits the road in the referendum. If we do this but nobody votes, then it doesn't do us any good. So kudos to you for following a grand tradition, and this goes all the way back to if you watch Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, standing around as an 19 student in the square of New York City, debating with people and changing the course of history. So there's ample precedent for this in our grand 250-year-old experiment. This is a super difficult year. Inflation and the cost of living increases that we have put it out there. See, these are facts of life, right? This is something that happens. The education budget is new to it. It happens every year. Everyone must deal with it. Expecting a community to go into stasis or worse, to go retrograde so that we don't have to deal with it is unrealistic. There may be emergency situations like COVID, like during 2008, where we have to do things we don't, unprecedented things we don't like to do. But we must plan for the eventuality of the fact that we are going to see, as our capitalist system is designed, we see us have these increases every year. It's called growth, and business depends on it, and they extol it, and Wall Street rewards it, and then when we get down to it at this level, we've got a lot of angst about it. So the nature of the process, unfortunately, conduces our communities to pit ourselves against each other. We don't need to do that. We need to reject that. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Be empathetic to seniors. We can expand the ordinance and take some of their tax burden and put it on the shoulders of those of us who can afford it. So that's great. And if you look at things like, I have 2 kids in the school system a long time ago. My youngest had French in the 2nd grade. There were multiple languages in the high school. My oldest never saw pay to play. I'm sorry, she did when she was older. There were multiple electives. You guys have different things now because of technology. But what I've seen over the years is a chipping away at that. And none of us, as professionals, as persons, would accept 40-year-old, 20-year-old, even 10-year-old medical technology or computer technology in our businesses. And we also need to understand that we should not be expecting 20-year-old, 40-year-old educational standards. You can't produce 21st century leaders with mid-20th century educational standards. And finally, I think that we need to look at, I am Chantel. So for the latest, this unassigned fund balance that we've been talking about is our rainy day fund combined with other funds. The latest figure that we were able to be given, which needs to be updated, was $12.3 million as of June 2024. We are working to get a more updated figure, but $12.3 million is 18.75%, 18.75% of our fiscal 25-26 proposed budget of $65 million, approximately $600,000. So we have money there that we could use to pay for costs that I would propose we talk about this tomorrow, like the extraordinary insurance things that we're taking a hit on, the one-time insurance thing that we're taking a hit on, hopefully it's not going to be next year, as well as to help use some of that to fund the budget, to take the onus and the burden off of our taxpayers, and especially our most vulnerable taxpayers. So it's something that I would really like to look at as we talk about this tomorrow. So I love what we were doing here tonight. I think we need to continue doing this, and I really thank you all for all of your input. It's been fabulous listening to everybody. I yield back.
Thank you, Councilor Beatty. Any other comments or questions from councilors or board members?
I think Board of Ed is good, Chairman Mike.
All right. Then I think we can proceed to our last item up on the agenda, last substantive item, and that is anyway, which was closing statements. Let's see, let me pull up the agenda here. Oh, I go first. All right, I guess I'll just thank everybody for having a good conversation tonight. I mean, I don't think I need to continue to restate that this is a difficult year, but I do want to thank the Board of Ed for coming here with a couple of creative solutions. I think the council is certainly interested in exploring the two that's presented. I would love to get our finance department to weigh in up on them, but I'm definitely interested to see what's possible here. And I just want to thank everyone for the respectful conversation. And you know, we'll continue this as the process requires with our meeting tomorrow and all the meetings throughout April that lead up to our referendum in May. Turn it over to you, Chairman Holt.
Thank you, Chairman Murray. I'm going to hand off my time to Vice Chair Gaucher.
Thanks, Tony. So I know I've done a lot of talking tonight already. I just want to say again, I really appreciate Jacob, you agreeing to have this meeting, and I really appreciate the counselors that are here and the Board of Ed that's here. I see that Dan's online, so we have everybody here. So thank you. Thanks again to the students who are coming and everybody listening online and the parents, community members here, knowing that there was no public participation. As much as I'd like to end it there for all of us, because I know everybody wants to be done. If you know me, you know that I got to fight the fight until the end. And this is my chance to talk to you, so I'm going to take it. But I will try to maybe say a little less than I was planning to originally. We talked about, you know, already that we have 74 line items of proposed reductions and the fact that this is going to touch every student. We mentioned how grateful we are that the students spoke last night. There's no one that we can hear it better from than the students themselves, and the students that have emailed too. So thank you so much for advocating for yourself and your peers. I did want to touch on, you know, some more of the things that we did receive, because the community doesn't know that, those things. So I wrote down things as I was going through emails and trying my best to get back to students first. So these discussed class sizes, loss of high school electives, lack of electives in the arts, loss of middle school electives, past budget reductions, concerns with limiting the nursing staff, high pay to play fees, concerns with longer bus routes, co-teaching reduction concerns, safety and security, lack of a social worker at the middle and high school, following 504s and IEPs, loss of past staff, impacts on college applications, impacts on scholarships and grant opportunities for colleges, and much more. I did also, something occurred to me when I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if they do this anymore, but you know those the frequently asked questions to remind you of your password. What street did you live on? You know, what was the first car you had? What's another one of those questions? Who was your favorite teacher? And what that really shows to me is that these questions are chosen because these are the things that were the most impactful or your strongest memories, things that people think that you would not forget. People remember their favorite teacher, right? They remember their favorite coach. They remember, you know, their favorite band director or whatnot, because they're making an impact on our students. They're making an impact on our students' learning, but they're making impacts on our students while they're learning. You know, we talk about the staff that we've lost, and we talk about the positions. We also lost those people. You know, they were advisors to students. They were people that our students counted on. It's more than just our concerns about increasing class sizes. And I know those things are the things that we have to look at, but it is the trusted people that, you know, get some of our children through. So I don't know if, you know, you necessarily all realize this as you go through emails, or there was public speaking last night, but there was a lot of staff as well. So we heard from an elementary interventionist. We heard from a high school math teacher. We heard from a high school ELA teacher. We heard from the THS choral teacher and drama club advisor. We heard from multiple paraprofessionals. We heard from the nurse and district nursing coordinator. And each of these people spoke about the tremendous impacts that the reduction has on students. They discussed low wages in comparison to other districts. They discuss true concerns for student academic achievement, for mental health, and for their safety. You know, we hear a lot of, you know, I didn't have these things. Right? Maybe we didn't grow up with some of these things, right? But I don't know about you. My household doesn't look the same as the household that I grew up with my parents. It doesn't look the same as the household with my grandparents. The things, the requirements that are placed on my children and you know, what is necessary to get into them every day and every year is well beyond what it was for me. Going through the college application process, which is something that I just did, very different world. You know, so many of our students talked about, it's not just grades anymore, it is so much more. So I ask you to keep that in mind. You know, there's a lot of things that we have to do now. There's that were not mandated then. The world is different. Our homes look different. Our families look different. What we need to provide for children in the course of a school day is different. And, you know, I think Counselor Noonan touched on this at the beginning. You know, I think that we need to stop pointing fingers, right? This is a community. We all contribute to services in this town that help it succeed. Every student, every individual in this town could tell you how they contribute, right? We have volunteers in the schools, we have volunteers at the senior center, we have volunteer firefighters. We need businesses to come to town, right? To increase our commercial revenue. Well, we need those existing businesses and new businesses to succeed, right? So who's going to keep them here? Who's going to frequent the restaurants? Who's going to be at that new gymnastics facility? Who's going to be at Starbucks? You know, lots of students are employed at Big Y. You know, the students and the parents are contributing a lot to this community as well. You know, I'll leave you with that. I believe that the community, every piece of it is important. Students, parents, single families, seniors. We all have to do our part to support every department in this town. But I will say that the education is this town's largest asset. It's not only its largest business, it has the most employees and it has the most customers. But it's its largest asset to enable us to take care of everyone in this community. So I hope very much that when you all deliberate tomorrow, that you take everything that we talked about tonight into account, everything that you've heard thus far. If you have any more questions, please feel free to ask us in between. I thank the superintendent for providing those solutions. I hope that you truly explore them and more. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, with that, we'll go to the final item, which is adjournment. Is there any objection to adjournment? All right, without objection, we are adjourned at 9:08 p.m. Thank you all and hope you all have a great night.